Today, we're going to discuss projections for the starting wide receiver unit. How many guys are going to bring into the regular season? We have 53-man roster cuts coming quickly, and the Jets have a couple of big decisions to make. Have been some standout performers during training camp, a couple of preseason games left to make these decisions. But there are a couple locks, obviously, at the wide receiver position. But some guys that are standing out are on the fringe of the roster to begin with. So should be an interesting discussion to see, who we think will make this roster. But Ryan, before we dive into these projections, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Alex. I mean, we're less than 2 weeks away now from the final 53, and some moves obviously took place yesterday. They put Mekhi Becton on injured reserve and released 4 players to get down to 85. And, we're 3 full weeks for camp, preseason game in the books, about a couple days away from practices with the Falcons before that game Monday night. So we're really starting to get an idea on where things stand here. And I think you really said it best. I mean, most of this group is pretty straightforward, and I think the top 5 guys to most people are pretty much locks to be on the final 53, but there are 2 players in particular, like you said, one on the fringe who's, not necessarily helping himself in any way. And then a rookie undrafted free agent who's, potentially making the roster, the special teams role and as a depth receiver to round out this group.
Absolutely. So, the locks here obviously are Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, and Corey Davis and Braxton Berrios. We also threw in Jeff Smith. But let's kind of break these guys down in anticipation of what they will accomplish or what their impact will be this year, with Zach Wilson especially kind of suffering that knee injury. So, surgery went well. Everything looks good. That's exactly what we wanted to hear from the Zach Wilson party. Because essentially, he's the future of this team. Joe Flacco is not the future of the Jets. Look, having a good backup is nice. Salah said it the other day, they feel as though they have 3 starting quarterbacks. They feel as though Zach, Joe Flacco, Mike White can all start if need be. We saw Mike White do some good stuff last year, actually. So that was a pretty good sign in terms of a long-term backup behind Zach Wilson. But, Zach is in play to make a return in the next couple of weeks, right? He'll probably miss a couple of regular season games, maybe 2, and then he'll make a comeback. But, he's got to be careful with that knee. He can't be, being over-reliant on running the football. The offensive line's got to do him some favors and keep him healthy and safe in the pocket so he can, take a lot of the pressure off of moving and running and the mobility that sometimes he's been forced to utilize to try and escape and extend plays, which is obviously a necessity at times. But Elijah Moore, he's your bread and butter at the wide receiver position. He is probably your WR1 right now. I would say that Corey Davis, the big money guy, has the WR1, I guess you could say title or coinage, but end of the day, Elijah Moore's your impact guy. He's the guy that's going to be going downfield. He's attacking the seams. He's your screen guy. He's your short yardage guy. He's your intermediate yardage guy. He can do it all. So I actually think Joe Flacco and Elijah Moore will probably start off the season on fire. I'm drafting him in all of my leagues that I can possibly land Elijah Moore. Not normally, I imagine you guys too probably don't like to draft Jets players, but they have some pretty talented ones now that can actually make an impact. Elijah Moore was fantastic last year for me down the stretch, finished with 538 yards and 5 touchdowns, a 56% catch rate, and 12.5 yards per reception. If he stays healthy, and I think, he's looking really good. He's a leader in that locker room already as a sophomore. He can make a pretty significant impact here. I think he's your WR1 right now, to be honest with you. That's my projection. What are you thinking about Elijah Moore? Do you think he's your WR1? Do you think he's still slightly behind Corey Davis?
I agree with you. I think Elijah Moore is the top receiver out of this group heading into the season. And I think he's, really poised to go for 1,000 yards this year. As long as he stays healthy, I think the final 6 games last year to me were no fluke. I think Elijah's incredibly talented. I think technically speaking, he's very sound. And I think the opportunities are ready to present themselves to him. He's had a strong camp. I mean, you see this guy's ability to create separation, how good of a route runner he is, just how sure his hands are catching the football. I mean, that's such a big deal and something he makes look so routine. And I think to me, 22 years old in his second year, the speed is there. The gadget ability, like you said, jet sweep, screen game, motioning pre-snap. There's so much, untapped potential in terms of this guy's usage and what Mike LaFleur can, do with in the scheme. And I think he is definitely primed to really, I honestly think he could be the Jets' best player by the end of 2022.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I mean, him, Michael Carter, Breece Hall could definitely be up there as impact guys. Even Tyler Conklin has showed some pretty good chemistry with the quarterbacks. But the next guy we have on the list is Garrett Wilson. We've seen him kill it this camp. He has been tremendous. The Jets have a pretty solid top 3 receivers with Moore, Wilson, Corey Davis as the lone veteran in this equation. But Garrett Wilson can do it all too. He can go downfield. He's quick. He's fast. He can be a dominant receiver in the screen game. He makes physical catches. He's not the most physical receiver off the line of scrimmage, so press man coverage may be a little bit tricky for him against some better corners, but he is a tremendous route runner. He makes plays. He's going to be an impact player for this offense moving forward. I'm very excited to see what he can do as a rookie. I'm most excited to see how they split up the target share between Moore, Wilson, and Davis, and how they split up these guys in the slot. Braxton Berrios is kind of your slot guy, but Moore and Wilson out of the slot is not something that I think they should avoid. I think that they can do a lot of great things attacking the seams. So, how do you think Garrett Wilson plays into this equation, what the target share may look like, and how they will utilize him to kind of maximize his value as a rookie?
For sure. I think Garrett is really, by the end of the season, going to be that second guy of this group. And he has a lot of similarities with Elijah. I think the main differences really are just Elijah's hands are a little bit more sure, as where I think Garrett gives you a little bit more contest catch ability, the ability to obviously jump and stay in the air. I think he offers you more value just as a possession type of target, leaves room for error, obviously, with his catch radius and the speed. He can play in the slot, a lot of the, quickness, just like this guy's ability to move as a route runner and, go in so many different directions, change. There's so much Garrett can do. He's got big hands. And I think that, you're really seeing him in that first preseason game, especially. I mean, he's inside and out, creating separation on multiple levels. He looks comfortable. Confidence is there. I think one of the reasons the Jets really liked him as a prospect is just his intelligence. And I think in this offensive scheme, like we've talked about with Mims, I mean, it's hard to pick up. And I think Garrett has the smarts to make an immediate impact. And I think, he and Elijah as a duo are going to be fun for years to come.
Definitely a dynamic duo there. And then you have Corey Davis, who obviously is a good possession guy, lost about 10 pounds of weight this offseason, 6'3", so probably around 200 pounds now. Looks a little bit more agile, put up 492 yards last season with 4 touchdowns after nearly reaching 1,000 yards and 5 scores with the Tennessee Titans, signed that big contract with the Jets. Obviously, he's quickly falling down the pecking order of receivers. And honestly, I could totally see them moving on from him after this year personally. Just saving the cap and maybe allocating it elsewhere, bring in another receiver for cheaper, maybe a younger option. I don't know exactly how they'll utilize him, but he's your boundary guy. He's your guy that's probably good possession receiver, third down option. You can do some stuff with him. Obviously, he's a pretty solid receiver, but he's not a number one. Like, he never was a number one receiver. He was always a great number 2 to AJ Brown with Tennessee. And now you're like expecting him to be a WR1. I don't think that was ever going to be a possibility. I think him slotting in and being the WR2 behind Elijah Moore, even WR3 by the end of the season to Garrett Wilson, he probably will thrive in that role. I think he's a better complement than he is a primary guy. And I think we're kind of seeing that as the scheme unfolds and we see how the target share is going to kind of roll out here. But obviously another lock to make the roster. What are your thoughts on Corey Davis and his usage?
For sure. I think Corey's a guy who's quietly had a good camp that's really flown under the radar. I mean, all these new exciting pieces and the youth that's been added to this offense. I think Corey has, just kind of naturally, he hasn't been discussed as much, but I think he's going to have an integral role in this offense. You said it, the size, the veteran experience is huge. I mean, outside of Berrios, really, the rest of this group is relatively young and inexperienced. And I think Corey provides a lot of value in that sense. I mean, early on last year, when Elijah was out and missed some time, I mean, Corey and Zach really had a good chemistry, and obviously we'll see, Zach's availability as the season, gets closer and closer. But I think Corey, like you said, early on in the year, he's definitely the guy opposite Elijah. I think really as Garrett gets more and more comfortable is when maybe his role could deteriorate a little bit more. But ultimately, I think Corey's going to be a guy who's got a ton of targets week to week in this offense and has a specific role just with his size alone.
Absolutely. And then you got the last two, locks, Braxton Berrios, who's your all-pro kick returner, and Jeff Smith, pretty solid downfield guy, can do some good stuff, reliable. They're probably locks. Does Jeff Smith have any special teams usage? Does he make an impact there? So he's a good special team
as
player,
a gunner, not as a returner. He'll probably
okay. Yeah, so you always look, gunners are probably one of the most underrated guys. Like, having a good punt team is essential. Getting beat on punts is like the bane of my existence. Having good gunners like Jeff Smith are essential. You need to have them on the roster. That's ultimately what it is. And his value there gives him that push. And then you have like Denzel Mims, who like had a really nice catch yesterday, and like he's made some flashy plays, but then you look at him in the game and he's not as good. Like, he's better in practice than he's in games. And it's like, he kind of disappears at times, has a couple drops. He doesn't really look that good in the bright lights. Braxton Berrios, Jeff Smith, Mims, what are you seeing with these guys, specifically Denzel Mims? Because, he's the guy on the fringe right here. This is the guy that could not make the roster. You got Calvin Jackson, who's been looking pretty good too. practice squad candidate. But, Mims at the end of the day could also fall into the practice. I don't think he will because, he's still former second round pick out of Baylor and, in his third season. I think that they'll probably give him the nod. But next year, if he's still struggling, I think he gets relegated. I think that'll be you see the Jets cut ties if he still doesn't make an impact in some way.
For sure. I think, what you said with Berrios and Jeff Smith is pretty spot on. I mean, depth receivers, guys with speed, guys with quickness, athletic ability, both have been with the team since 2019 now. So they have some experience here. And, both on special teams, obviously Berrios in the return game. Jeff Smith has a ton of 4.3 speed. And, like you said, as a gunner, is definitely going to provide some value to Brant Boyer's unit. And to me, they're both locks. I think, you've seen it throughout practice. You saw it in the first preseason game. I mean, Jeff Smith is really rotating in. Obviously, with the receivers, they really rotate guys just to keep them fresh. And I've seen this heat, and he's really been pretty routinely with the ones. So to me, he's a lock. And to me, if I had to say, I think those are the only 5 receivers on this final 53-man roster. I think you look at some of the positions elsewhere. I mean, I think 7 corners make it. I think 11 D linemen make it. 3 quarterbacks are going to make it. And I think even a 4th tight end. So you start to really, limit spots. And I'm not so sure Mims is going to make it at the end of the day. I mean, the drop in the preseason game is frustrating, and just the inconsistency, I think overall, that this guy has a ton of talent. You saw the circus catch he made in practice yesterday. He goes up, a fade ball and punches it in the end zone. But I mean, just the drops, and I feel like it's really hard to get a read on what Michael LaFleur and Robert Saleh really think of him. I mean, they say so many good things, but he's working with the 3s. Like earlier this week being at practice and not really even seeing him with the 2s. He's definitely behind Jeff Smith. And I don't know if it's on the final 53, if it's a trade or if it's getting outright released, but I don't really think it's looking great for Mims at this point in time, if I had to take a guess.
Yeah, I mean, look, the inconsistency is tough. Maybe she's a fresh, I guess, appearance somewhere else. Maybe just reset it, like clean slate with another team. Sometimes players take to that. I could totally see him ending up with like Jacksonville or something, or even like Detroit. A team that maybe needs some depth at receiver. But like Denzel is a good. The thing is, like, he shows up at weird moments. Like, he has some nice plays. You're like, oh, like there's Denzel Mims, and then he disappears for like 5 months. And you're like, where the hell did Denzel Mims go? It's tough. I don't trust Baylor receivers like Tyquan Thornton, who was drafted, like, I think a pick before George Pickens, is like, apparently the Patriots are like, he is not even close to being an impact player. Meanwhile, George Pickens might be the best camp receiver so far as a rookie this year. It's like, that's the difference. Like, Baylor receivers kind of are like fool's gold, like a little bit of pyrite. And, I think that, the Steelers are just tremendous at finding receivers to begin with. Deontay Johnson, of course, you got Chase Claypool, who wasn't that everyone thought he was going to be solid. And George Pickens, obviously a good receiver, but he's been absolutely killing it. If you're also into fantasy football, that's another guy. Late round draft pick, go get George Pickens. Him and Chase Claypool are going to be battling out for the wide receiver 1 status there this year. But again, they don't really have a quarterback. So Mitch Trubisky's not that good. We'll see. There's definitely some value, but definitely not a guy I'm starting unless proven otherwise. But like you said, Denzel Mims definitely in a tough spot here, could be released. But guys, I'd love to hear perspectives on these receivers. There's a couple of interesting decisions the Jets have to make in the coming days. We have a couple preseason games left to really give us some more information so we can make these decisions a little bit more efficiently. But always happy to hear your perspectives and narratives below. If you agree, disagree, always happy to have conversations as well. So appreciate that in the YouTube comments. As always, make sure to like and subscribe to YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Jets episode.